Alice Vale.
And I'm Monsignor Charles Minor. In this edition of our magazine, we'll take a look at some interesting work that's being done in the field of mental health.
We'll also meet a unique man from the Midwest who's profited by his devotion to the land. Our short subjects feature a dance for peace, and the Trenton bicentennial briefs continue.
The Quakers in our state are responsible for many innovations. One that may not be too well known is their pioneering work in the field of mental health. The staff at Friends Hospital keep that tradition alive today. In 1813, Benjamin Rush, signer of the Declaration of Independence and head of the prestigious Pennsylvania Hospital, expressed his concern for the slender and inadequate means employed for alleviating the conditions of the insane. He lamented the slow process of humanity's efforts to relieve their suffering. The insane were treated like criminals, shunned like beasts, and put on display for the amusement and curiosity of others. Accommodations for the insane were provided by cells in the basement of Pennsylvania Hospital, and the more violent patients were restrained by chains attached to staples in the wall. Despite Benjamin Rush's attempts to implement needed reforms, there was not at that time any special concern shown to the mentally ill. The prevalent view of insanity in that year 1813 was that insanity was a necessary evil and an integral part of the social hierarchy. The need to cure the insane was seen as an unnecessary and impossible task. Thus, Pennsylvania Hospital's primary reason for taking in these unfortunates was similar to that of other institutions at the time. It was the hospital's responsibility to keep the insane off the streets where they tended to terrorize their neighbors. Quakers had long been interested in the plight of the mentally ill. They demonstrated quite clearly that they recognized insanity as a medical problem. The Quakers of Pennsylvania, strong, active, independent, and fiercely stubborn, were hit hard by the Revolutionary War. Their refusal to fight stripped them of political power and prestige, but they didn't wane in their conviction and concern that it was very necessary to find a cure for the mentally ill. In that same year, 1813, a few miles outside Philadelphia, ground was broken for an institution that would provide an answer to Dr. Rush's concerns. Erected by a small group of Quakers and known then as Friends Asylum, one of the earliest non-profit psychiatric hospitals in the United States was begun and devoted exclusively to humane and moral care of the insane. Friends Hospital stands today on 100 tranquil acres and remains committed to the Quaker philosophy that there is that of God in every man and that kindness and moral treatment are necessary elements in the recovery of mentally ill patients. Dr. James Delaplane, director of Friends Hospital, talks about the Quaker philosophy and how it applies today in the care of the mentally ill.
Have changed a bit over 160 years. The emphasis on the Quaker principle that there's that of God in every person is the abiding value on which the hospital operates today. There isn't so much specific emphasis on Quakerism. Obviously, there are many fewer Quakers related to the hospital now than there were in the early days, but the principle is very strong. And that gets expressed in the emphasis on an individual treatment plan, on putting the patient first before his diagnosis, before the mental health system or the health industry in general, and focusing always back to the individual so that we can assist the person.
One of the adjunctive therapies used in Friends Hospital is horticultural therapy. Mona Twerk, director of that program, explains how it works.
Probably the thing that makes horticultural therapy unique compared to occupational therapy, recreational therapy, or art therapy, again, is that you're working with a living material. And it's an ongoing process, which means that even though we may be growing tomato seeds today, a group that's only here for 3 weeks in the hospital may not see the end result of that, but a group 2 months from now may. So that it has to be something that's ongoing. It also changes with the seasons, which so does life, and people can relate to that in many different ways. Also, it's not an activity that people view as a kid's activity or something that only old people do. It's a universal activity that most anyone has had some exposure to, even if it's just to take a walk outside, to be involved in nature. The nurturing aspect goes with horticultural therapy, which is very helpful in terms of patients, for instance, who might have had to deal with separation or loss of a loved one, or they may be severely depressed.
I'm really depressed, and I haven't been able to sleep at night, and haven't been eating or taking care of my kids and my house.
It sounds like you're really experiencing a lot of discomfort. Has anything happened recently?
Well, it's just been so long that I've been so depressed, and last night my husband came in the bedroom just as I had a bottle of pills I was going to take.
You had a bottle of pills you were going to take.
Mm-hmm.
Mrs. Smith, many times when people are feeling the amount of discomfort that you're feeling right now, they do have suicidal thoughts. And it's my understanding that last night your plan was to take the pills. Can you tell me more about with her if you experienced any suicide?
We're witnessing is an improvisation by two nurses used as a training film at Friends Hospital. It's part of the intensive training the psychiatric nurses receive, which results in the individual and caring treatment patients at Friends receive. Mrs. Betty Shikatani, Director of Nursing at Friends, talks about the skills that psychiatric care entails at Friends Hospital.
What we have learned through research, and what we certainly educate all our nurses here, is that any patient who at any time expresses any way at all that they would want to harm themselves or to take their life, to hurt themselves, say such things as, oh, life isn't worth living, or I'd like out, we take that seriously, and we would explore that with the patient. When I talk about nursing, I think of nursing as an art, and that's sort of an old-fashioned word, nursing arts. But it is, and it isn't just a case of what you know or the sciences you know, it's making it work for the patient.
People just tend to get in the rat race and somewhat lost. And my advice to everyone would be to step back for a moment every day, ideally, and reflect on what one's life is all about.
The first Catholic church in New Jersey was built in Trenton in 1814. It was named St. John's after John Baptist Sartori. John Sartori was a remarkable man, a native of Italy. He was the son of a nobleman whose formidable task it was to guard the Vatican jewels. When John Sartori came to the U.S. in 1800, he settled in Trenton. A businessman by trade, he established factories in the city. He was also involved in real estate. Sartori later became an admiral in the Navy and papal envoy to the U.S. Because of his strong religious beliefs, the Sartori home was the center of Catholicism in Trenton for many years. When a priest would come into the area, he was certain to stop at the Sartori house, where friends and neighbors would gather to celebrate Mass. When the number of people attending those services became too great, John Sartori felt that a church should be built. In 1814, with the help of friends, a small brick church was erected on the corner of Lamberton and Market Streets in Trenton. Its name, St. John's. Within the next few years, 10 churches were erected throughout New Jersey. Catholicism was on the rise.
They gathered in a schoolyard, the young, the old, over 100 people representing 90 countries scattered across the globe. Perhaps Greg Reynolds, the professional dancer and choreographer who called them together, can best explain the reason.
We're gathered together today for two reasons. One, to celebrate Immigrants Day, and two, to come together to focus on the need for peace throughout the world. And that's what our circle dance is about.
Not many people here are professional dancers, but that makes no difference. The circle dance for peace is a prayer meant to be danced by everyone.
Denmark, Djibouti, Dominica.
So what you see is all these people coming together, representing different countries in their various costumes, uniting the world for a common cause, and that is peace.
Estonia, Ethiopia, Fiji, Finland.
Laddie was there. So were Rags and Beauregard. And there was Jessica with her good friend Teddy. They came to the grounds of St. Joseph's Monastery in Baltimore, Maryland. People of all ages with pets of every sort. They came to take part in a special yearly event. Father Rick Frechette, their parish priest, was there to do the honors.
Now make sure all your little animals are attentive now, because this is where we do the blessing of the pets. For the boundless love in a puppy's eyes and the gentle wings of a bird that flies. For the soft embrace of a hamster's fur and the trusting sound of a kitten's purr. For the love they show us every day, in gratitude to God we pray.
Father Rick blessed each one with a sprinkle of holy water. It was a ceremony that would have delighted St. Francis of Assisi.
Now Jessica wanted her teddy bear done, right? Here. There we go. All right. That was the first amen we got out of the crowd. Okay.
And when all the folks left with their newly blessed pets, they seemed delighted too. Especially Jessica and her Teddy.
In 1980, the Catholic bishops of the Midwest published a statement entitled Strangers and Guests. It summarized their concern about the use of the land, and it stressed the importance of the recycling process as a way of maintaining the balance of nature. Eugene Perrault was one man who took their statement to heart.
We in the Heartland inherited from both the Native American and Judeo-Christian traditions a sense of reverence for the land as God's gift for us and a mandate to share the land's benefits. We have not always been faithful to those traditions during our tenure on the land. We need to reflect once again on our responsibility to be stewards of the land.
The land belongs to the earth, belongs to God, of course, belongs to the earth, but it also belongs to all the creatures who are on it and who get life from it. That's from the bugs on up to man himself. God is the creator of all of them. They created nature, so he also created the laws that nature must operate by. And one of those laws is to return to the soil and return to the environment whatever you take in by way of the natural resources, return it so it can be used again.
An obedience to these laws is rewarded with an abundance of healthy life, yet disobedience can mean scarcity, sickness, and often death. Eugene Perot and his family have reaped the benefits of his continuous devotion to these laws and to the land. Today, his 2,200-acre family farm in southwest Missouri is in the top 5% of the productive farms in America. However, 60 years ago, when he inherited this land from his father at the turn of the century, it barely even produced.
On this particular land, the first 80 acres that I planted never made a single ear on 80 acres. And the cattle sickened and died for lack of proper kind of nutrition, and they suffered from broken bones and from about every disease in the book.
Those who are God's stewards on the land are also co-creators with God in guiding the land's productive power and in conserving the land's natural gifts. This land had lost its capacity to produce. In 1916, the Missouri Bulletin wrote that the land which Gene and area farmers possessed was no longer productive, and went on to suggest Gene and area farmers should sell their homes and search for more fertile soil.
Well, what would you do then with your land? You're leaving your home. You're fighting for your home. You're just like a red bird or a rabbit that fights for his home. He's got kids in it. And fight a snake or fight anything else and may get destroyed in the process, but he's going to fight for it. And the farmer does the same thing. He wants to hold on to it.
While area farmers fled their land, Gene began taking samples of his soil. The tests that followed confirmed what he had feared for some time. Several key plant food minerals had been depleted from his soil, not only in his cultivated land, but also in his grazing land, of which his cattle depended on for nourishment. What followed in those next 50 years was the beginning of Gene's understanding of the ceaseless cycle of life and death. It led to countless theories and experiments, and finally to his current book, Our Margin of Life, the study of the return of life's gifts to the land, a process every creature on earth must endure.
They got to have death, so nature had to invent death. But she invented death. And that wasn't enough, because if the dead things stay dead and don't decay, that's not recycling. They had to invent other organisms to recycle the dead. Death is just as important as life.
And as Gene's understanding grew, he developed several methods of regenerating the elements which the soil lacked. His theories and cultivation practices have won him notoriety across the country. Yet he attributes much of the success of his experiments to a family effort. Gene, now 82, his son Severin, and his 3 sons, 4 generations in all, run the farm today and are quick to support their father's philosophy.
My view of the land, and my father's view of the land, is that it's a capital. It's the capital of agriculture. And if you don't maintain it, eventually, as in any other business, you're going to go out of business.
Well, that's tremendous advantage, of course. My son and his sons, my grandchildren, operate it, and they do a tremendous job of it because it's here, and it's a working factor.
Some things about running with a family are, I guess, more difficult than they are if you have all hired help. But on the other hand, you have, I think, a greater sense of loyalty and dedication, and you know, people that feel that they share in the land itself. And this you don't get if you hire people by the hour.
A walk with Gene is to begin an understanding of the recycling process in a vast yet poetic setting.
This is recycling, and if you'll observe in this particular case right here, here's a pile of manure, and here is the green grass. That's as far as the plant food has gone away from that pile of manure. It does not go to the creek. It does not wash into the ocean finally. It stays right here on the land where it belongs.
Water is another precious element which now must be conserved. By holding the rainwater in his 7-acre lake, he not only prevents flooding, but also uses the water for the irrigation of his vast fields of wheat, popcorn, beans, and several other grain crops. He also stocks the pond with catfish and harvests them using a method the Japanese have begun to study. Had he not engineered and built the lake, 1980 would have been a disastrous year.
This is by far the driest year. It had 20 inches of rainfall when the normal rainfall is 48 inches. And the cracks in the soil out here reveal the extent of the drought. It's a drought disaster area. And still, the area has produced some crops because the fertility of the land and the plant food has been returned to the soil. The potential to produce the crop has been given to the land.
Gene and his family's devotion to the land has brought about several startling discoveries concerning the nation's chemical fertilizer supply, one of which Gene feels warrants the nation's attention immediately.
We're only producing 20% of our potash needs. The rest of it must come from Canada. If they shut off the supply tomorrow, we would face starvation as a nation, and we'd face it pretty fast. And we talk about a panic, we would really have one that would make the present energy crisis look pretty sick.
An obedience to the land and God's laws of nature has given Gene and his family much success.
You have to pray a little. Sometimes that's about all you got left.
I go to church every Sunday. And I go there because the priests are there and they're preaching the sermon and they think I ought to go to church. But it's one day of the week. Now for 6 days of the week I work with God. And I do the work and he does the miracles.
Faithful to the land and to its laws, and a deep understanding of her endless cycle, Jean Perot is a true steward of the land.
I do the work and God does the miracles. That's what Eugene Perot said. It actually summarizes our lives in a beautifully simple way. Next week, we'll meet a local artist whose love of art is blended with his religious convictions. Also, we'll meet a former gang leader who now works with young people in East Harlem. Our short segments will feature another Trenton Centennial Brief and a look at Jesuits on Wall Street.
Many of you have been so good as to write us, and we do enjoy it. If you have any comments or suggestions, why don't you write us? Reel to Reel, 222 North 17th Street, Philadelphia, 19103.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed the show.
As always, it's good to be with you. Goodbye, and God bless you.